go ahead.
Good morning, distinguished members of the commission. Ladies and gentlemen, I come before you today to present a resolution entitled Resolution Opposing the Federal Government's 30 by 30 Land Preservation Goal. 10 key points are in the handouts that I gave you, and I'll just kind of gloss over them so we get an idea of why I came today to present this. We learned a little bit more about it, the Farm Bureau conference that we had in Dickinson last week with Trent Luce, and it's prompted me to do this. First key point is the 30 by 30 program is advanced by radical environmentalists, calling for permanent protection of 30% of America's lands and oceans by 2030. It is an international agenda, not a locally driven initiative. There are these plans at work already in Canada and several European countries. So it's not just something that's homegrown here in the United States. The plan is being aggressively pushed by the Biden administration, usually using the politically motivated climate crisis agenda to gain control of America's land. They have promised to use every tool in the toolbox, from conservation programs to federal land acquisitions and withdrawals. There is no credible scientific reasoning or facts that support the need to preserve any specific amount of land to cure climate change. If restricting land solves climate change and prevents species from going extinct, as they claim, we would not be in a climate crisis today, because 1/3 of the United States is already owned by the federal and state governments and managed under restrictive land use protections. Their crisis math does not add up. If we are losing a football field to development every 30 seconds, as they claim, this roughly totals 11 million acres in 10 years. That is far short of the 681 million acres they say must be permanently protected to avoid the forthcoming irreversible climate disaster. There is no constitutional or statutory authority for the President, the Department of the Interior, or the Department of Agriculture to set aside and permanently preserve 30% of all land and oceans in the U.S. And no such authority is referenced in the executive order or the President's 30 by 30 report. Let me repeat that. There is no constitutional or statutory authority. Instead of working with states and local governments, such as this distinguished body, the Biden administration's first act to implement the 30 by 30 was to remove local government's veto power over federal land acquisitions when they rescinded the Department of Interior Secretarial Order 3388, which nullified the Bowman Soil Conservation District's Natural Resource Policy Plan. The advocates behind the program do not have any skin in the game or property to conserve. They are seeking to place other people's land and property rights under the control of the administrative state. Taking 30% of our lands and oceans is only the first step. Advocates are working towards the international goal known as the Half-Earth Agenda, to permanently conserve 50% of our lands and oceans by 2050, and September 22nd, 2021, the IUCN Conservation Congress in France called for 70% of the world's lands and oceans to be protected. 70%. If proponents were truly concerned about the welfare of species and habitat, they would oppose placing more land under the control of federal management or environmental elites, and instead remove the regulatory restrictions on America's landowners who provide the best managed lands while producing the food, fiber, minerals, and energy we depend on to create wealth, defend our liberties, and live free.
What was that Bowman slope? NRCS plan, what was that called?
The National Resource Policy Plan.
National Resource Policy Plan.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. And that was enacted March 4th, 2019. Basically, Department of the Interior Secretarial Order 3388 took all of the guts out of this. Basically, whatever is in this is now useless, according to that.
It's not useless.
It is.
For the most part, it is. And what this resolution will do is put the guts back in. It protects this from being.
Protects our citizens,
Right.
our residents of.
Absolutely,
these two
it
counties.
will protect this plan from interference by the federal government any further.
Right.
So, to get into the resolution. A resolution opposing the federal government's 30 by 30 land grab preservation goal. Whereas, Bowman County is a legal and political subdivision of the state of North Dakota for which the Board of County Commissioners Board is authorized to act, and whereas, Bowman County contains 743,558.4 acres of land in the state of North Dakota, and whereas the well-being, health, safety, welfare, economic condition, and culture of Bowman County, its businesses, and its citizens depend on private land ownership and the use of these resources, and whereas many of Bowman County's businesses and its citizens are involved in or otherwise depend on industries that utilize private lands and their resources, including farming, livestock raising and production, oil and gas exploration and production, mining and mineral development, recreational industries, hunting, and other outdoor recreation, and whereas these industries are important components of the North Dakota economy and are major contributors to the economic and social well-being of Bowman County and its citizens, and whereas the governments are instituted among people deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed to secure their inherent and inalienable rights and for the protection of their property. And whereas private property rights are guaranteed full protection under the Constitution of North Dakota, as well as the Constitution of the United States, which prohibit the erosion of these rights for public purpose. And whereas the federal government currently owns 5.26% of the land within the county, and the Bureau of Land Management and Army Corps of Engineers are responsible for managing approximately 39,136 acres of these federal lands, as illustrated in Exhibit A, attached here too. And whereas within Bowman County, the state of North Dakota owns and manages approximately 28,118 acres of school trust lands and state historical society land, as illustrated in Exhibit B.
Jason, let me stop you a minute. Did you skip a page?
No, I did not.
Are you missing one? I've got an extra one or something. From where you were at the bottom of the first page, my next one starts out where the federal conservation program artificially drives the cost up and directly.
You missed yours, they're just turned around, that's the third page.
Do you have the other page?
Yeah, I've got the one you're reading from, they're just switched around, okay,
Okay.
gotcha.
Whereas, within Bowman County, the state of North Dakota owns and manages approximately 28,118 acres of school trust lands and state historical society land, as illustrated in Exhibit B. And whereas on January 27th, 2021, President Joseph R. Biden Jr. issued Executive Order 14008 entitled Tackling the Climate Crisis at Home and Abroad, 86 Federal Register 7619, and whereas in Section 216 of Executive Order 14008, President Biden directed the Secretary of Interior, in consultation with the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Commerce, Chairman of the Council of Environmental Quality, and other senior officials to develop a program to conserve at least 30% of the lands and waters in the United States by 2030, which is called the 30 by 30 program, America the Beautiful, and any other name as shall be designated in reference to Executive Order 14008 in whole or part thereof. And whereas under the 30 by 30 program, an estimated 700 million acres of our nation's lands would be set aside and permanently preserved in its natural state by 2030, preventing the productive use of these lands and their resources. And whereas there is no constitutional or statutory authority for the President, the Department of the Interior, the Department of Agriculture, or any other federal agency to set aside and permanently preserve 30% of all land and water in the United States, and no such authority is referenced in Executive Order 14008. And whereas the goal of conserving at least 30% of the land and water in the United States is a public purpose, not voted on or consented to by the people, Congress, or the North Dakota legislature. And whereas the 30 by 30 program seeks to replace the decision-making of independent landowners who have been caring for these lands for generations with federal mandates and restrictions. And whereas the Biden administration has stated they will be using all the tools in existing law to reach their 30% target by 2030, including conservation easements in perpetuity, federal conservation programs, national heritage areas, wildlife corridors, endangered species listings, and critical habitat designations, and all other similar programs. And whereas placing private lands into permanent conservation status will cause dramatic and irreversible harm to the economy of North Dakota and counties such as Bowman County, whose citizens depend on private lands for their security and prosperity. And whereas lands placed under permanent conservation easements reduce the value of that parcel of land while increasing the tax burden on other private landowners and industries to make up the property valuation difference. And whereas federal conservation programs artificially drive up the cost of and directly compete with the working landowners who depend on the ability to lease or purchase those lands for the production of the food, fiber, energy, and minerals our nation requires. And whereas the 30 by 30 program, if implemented, will conflict with the plans, policies, and programs of Bowman County as expressed in the Natural Resource Policy Plan adopted March 4th, 2019, which obligates the federal and state government to coordinate its policy development with the Bowman Slope Soil Conservation District. And now therefore be it resolved by the Board of County Commissioners of Bowman County, North Dakota, as follows. 1. The board opposes the 30 by 30 program, including its objective of permanently preserving at least 30% of the nation's lands and waters in its natural state by 2030, or any similar program that will set aside and prevent the productive use of lands within our jurisdiction. 2. The board further opposes the designation and use of lands in Bowman County to be included as part of the 30 by 30 program, whether these be through conservation programs, easements, national heritage areas, wildlife preserves, wildlife corridors, open space, or other federal designations preventing the development and productive use of the resources on or within such lands. 3. The board supports the continued private ownership of land in the county, recognizing the nation's need for domestic sources of minerals, energy, timber, food, and fiber. 4. The board recognizes and supports the state of North Dakota laws governing water rights and water use, and opposes any federal designation of waters and water courses within the county that would impair or restrict water diversions and uses authorized under North Dakota law. 5. The board opposes and disagrees with using any public purpose, including global climate change, to set aside large tracts of land as preserves or open space to fulfill the 30 by 30 program's objectives. 6. The board also maintains that any lands or other rights that are acquired to fulfill the 30 by 30 program's objectives should be acquired only from willing sellers, landowners, and for the payment of full and fair market value for all rights and interests acquired, and not through regulatory compulsion, and only after analyzing and considering the impacts of such land acquisitions on the well-being, health, safety, welfare, economy, and culture of Bowman County, its businesses, and its citizens. 7. The board requires that any proposed federal land acquisitions within their jurisdiction have the consent of the Board of Commissioners. This includes any transfer of conservation easements from land trusts to the federal government. 8, the board shall send a copy of this resolution to the U.S. Departments of Interior and Agriculture, the North Dakota Department of Agriculture, the North Dakota Attorney General, Governor Doug Burgum, and all other relevant federal and state agencies. That is the resolution. I would like to close for your consideration with a quote from a utilitarian philosopher, John Stuart Mill, who delivered an 1867 inaugural address at the University of St. Andrews, stating, "Let not anyone pacify his conscience by the delusion that he can do no harm if he takes no part and forms no opinion. Bad men need nothing more than to encompass their ends than that good men should look on and do nothing. He is not a good man who, without protest, allows wrong to be committed in his name and with the means which he helps to supply, because he will not trouble himself to use his mind on the subject." I would ask that the commission vote to table this resolution until the next official meeting in order to have time for reasonable and prudent consideration of all the facts and evidence and to seek constituents' advice and consent. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in at one time, so I was just gonna say, we'll have to have Andrew go through it too. I don't know, does he have a copy?
He has, I emailed him a copy this morning, yep. Any questions?
Yes, I do. Who drew up this resolution?
So
Is it a standard one and you switch the?
it is one that has been implemented in 130 counties around the country, and it is provided by American Stewards.us, and I can provide the website for the
No,
materials.
that's all right.
Okay.
I was wondering where it
Right.
started from.
It started from there,
Okay.
and 130 counties throughout the U.S. have adopted it already. As it stands, if it would come under your consideration, and it would be adopted, it would be the first one in the state of North Dakota.
Jason,
Yes, sir.
on number 4 in your second page, on the water courses and water right, would that have anything to do with the navigable waters that they're trying to push through, where, you know, your little creek behind your house, the feds would control that and
Right, it would prevent them from unilaterally doing that.
doing that, yeah.
Right.
And that, we're,
Within our county,
right,
right. Mhm.
Use your microphone, please.
It would prevent the federal government from unilaterally making any decisions on water rights within the county.
right, because, you know, your stream behind your house is not a navigable stream.
No,
But
it-
they want control of that.
Absolutely, and we've seen them do it in other states and counties, and that's one of the reasons why that provision is in there.
Okay.
That gives the commission here more control over what happens in our county without ceding power. We take the power back from the federal government to make those decisions.
Doesn't that kind of fall under that natural resource policy plan that we put in place a couple of years ago?
It would, but under, what was it, 3388, that natural resource policy plan is,
Has no value.
it has no power because of that secretarial order. This, because it specifically designates this, and it talks about how we must follow the plan, and we hold the federal government accountable to following this plan, brings the power back into that natural resource policy plan.
This would.
Yes. Yes, this resolution would put the teeth back in.
Well, Jason, thank you for going to the work. You had to do quite a little work to get figures and so on to fit in here, so it wasn't just like copying it from somebody else. You did a lot of work on it, so.
I'm running out of midnight oil to burn.
Well, I think that plan that we put together for our own residents has a lot of value to this county and our residents. I mean, we know best what needs to be done in this county, and that's what's the purpose. Am I right on that?
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I was totally unaware that there'd been something to negate that plan.
Yeah, I was
didn't even
too.
know it.
Yep, Department of the Interior Secretarial Order 3388 totally nullifies our natural resource policy plan for Bowman Slope soil conservation.
When was that done, Jason? You know?
I don't know the exact date. I guess we can look it up and I'll get back to you on that.
That's the Department of Interior did that.
Correct.
For me, just bringing that plan back has a lot of value.
Absolutely. I mean, what was the point of doing it if the federal government's just gonna slap our hand and say, shame on you, you can't do that? It's our county.
This was put together by residents of this county.
Absolutely.
Well, looking at the map that's in this, it looks as though our governor's behind this, not of a resolution as this form, is what I'm trying to say.
Right, yep. That is correct.
Another question maybe you can't answer, Jason, when is all of this foolishness of Biden's executive order supposed to come into effect?
All we can say for sure is they want it done by 2030.
Yeah.
They will never directly come out and say exactly what they're doing and when they're doing it. They will give, we would likes, and this is what our plan is, but they won't ever tell us how or when. And that is one of the reasons why we need a resolution like this in order to protect us from that eventuality. Whether they do or not, it has been stated it is their intent. And it would be prudent to have this resolution and not need it, than need it and not have it.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, can I address the whole audience? Is there anybody in here that's not in favor of this resolution that would like to speak? Jared? I'm sorry.
I can speak.
I wanna know I'm against the 30 and 30, but I'm against this resolution. It comes down to personal property rights. Personal property rights, if this is passed, now people need permission from the county if they're gonna sell, say, to a government agency. Where does it stop from there? When does the next group come in and say, I want you to build a resolution so that we need county commission permission to sell land to this group? This is an educational thing. The 30 and 30 is an executive order. It's not congressional law. Who's to say the next president's not gonna come in and overturn it? Most executive orders that are taken to the Supreme Court are overturned in the Supreme Court. I'm okay with you guys doing a resolution if possible to protect the local land use plan, but to leave the 30 and 30 stuff out of it. This is an educational thing to the public. And it's my opinion, a personal property rights issue, not a county commission issue. If I wanna sell my land to whoever for whatever reason, that's my choice. And I'm afraid it just doesn't stop here with the 30 and 30 or selling to the federal government. You allow one, as we have experienced in multiple organizations in this county, you say yes to one, you've opened the door for the next group to come in and ask for the same thing. So that's where I stand, thank you.
Thank you, Jared.
Anybody else wanna say anything? questions? You guys?
I'd like to make a motion to table that and discuss it at the next meeting.
Okay. Got a motion to table the resolution?
Second that, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like Andrew to review this and make recommendations to us.
Andrew, did you hear most of what was said?
Yep, I got all of it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor to table the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried to table.